Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moment. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Martial Universe Season 7 Part 24 based on novel. So let's start. The person facing Ying Huan was similarly another lady. This lady was dressed in red. She had a tall figure and gorgeous looks. Her slightly raised eyebrows let others know that she was also an arrogant individual. The lady dressed in red was holding a red whip that looked akin to a fiery python. As she swung it back and forth, it formed a cunning and deceptive arc. Gradually, powerful fluctuations start to spread out from within. It was obvious that this was a fairly powerful heavenly soul treasure. That woman is Song Yang, one of the top 3 amongst the younger generation of the Great Precipice Cave. It is rumored that she had advanced to the 8 Yuan Nirvana stage rather recently. Her strength can match some of the most outstanding senior direct disciples of the Four Halls, said Mo Ling in a low voice. After hearing Mo Ling's introduction, Lin Dong faintly nodded his head. After Ying Huan returned to the sect from the previous incident, her strength had advanced and she had also reached 8 Yuan Nirvana stage. Hence, it would not be an easy task for the latter to defeat her. With this thought in mind, Lin Dong turned around and looked in the direction where the members from the Great Precipice Cave were at. At the front of their group sat 2 old men in grey who were smiling as they observed the duel in the arena. Displayed on their chests was an insignia of a cliff edge. It was obvious that they were from the Great Precipice Cave. Lin Dong's eyes swept across their bodies before shifting to the individual behind them. He wore black and was currently crossing his hands in front of his chest. He watched the fight in the arena, and a slight trace of amusement could be seen from the corners of his mouth. The aura from this man was much stronger than the lady in red currently fighting in the arena. In fact, it looked as if he was about to reach the 9 Yuan Nirvana stage. His strength could be compared to Qing Yi, Mu Li and anyone on that level. It seems that there were indeed some skilled younger generation members in the Great Precipice Cave. That fellow is Hu Zhen, the strongest amongst the younger generation members of the Great Precipice Cave. It is reputed that he has already reached the peak of the 8 Yuan Nirvana stage and is about to break through to the 9 Yuan Nirvana stage. Additionally, he is the only person from the Great Precipice Cave that hasn't fought yet, said Mo Ling. Hearing this, Lin Dong faintly nodded his head. While they were talking, the Dao sect disciples around them became excited due to the arrival of reinforcements. Immediately, they rapidly cleared a path and pushed the 2 of them to the front. When Lin Dong arrived, it caused quite a great commotion amongst the Dao sect disciples. Hence, as he walked to the front, a few disciples from the Great Precipice Cave immediately turned over and stared at him. From the reaction of the Dao sect disciples, anyone could tell that the Lin Dong had quite a reputation. Who is that fellow? I've never heard of such a figure amongst the top Dao sect disciples. I'm not sure. The doubtful gazes of the Great Precipice Cave disciples interweaved for a while before they started to whisper in low voices. Just a brat at the 6 Yuan Nirvana stage. There's no need to worry. As long as Ying Xiao doesn't show up, the chances of our victory should still be very high, said the male in black while he faintly smiled. He shot a glance at Lin Dong before withdrawing his gaze. That's because we have senior brother Hua here. I bet there aren't many people amongst the Dao sect younger generation members who can compete with you, the disciples standing beside Hua Shen immediately replied with smiles on their faces. Hua Shen smiled. His smile contained an arrogance that was hard to conceal. Naturally, amongst the younger generation members, his strength would give him the qualifications to do so. However, it all depended on whether he chose the correct battleground. Lin Dong naturally saw the Hu Zhen's condescending look. Unable to resist, he smiled faintly and said, "It seems that I'm being looked down on." Within the arena, Ying Huan also heard the commotion from her surroundings. Turning her big eyes around, she finally spotted Lin Dong, who was standing somewhere to her side. However, her eyes barely swept across Lin Dong's body before she turned away. Her indifferent manner caused the nearby Mo Ling and the rest to feel a little embarrassed. Regardless, they were the ones who asked Lin Dong to help them. However, they never expected that she would actually not show even the slightest hint of appreciation. However, compared to their slight embarrassment, Lin Dong broke into laughter and shook his head. Although others did not notice, he was able to notice that the taut and serious expression in her eyes had quietly dissolved when she saw him. The only reason that lass was unwilling to show it was because she could not put down her pride. As his eyes left Ying Huan's body, Lin Dong took a look at Chen Zhen, Wu Dao, and the rest on the platform. They had also noticed Lin Dong's arrival and they immediately nodded their heads at him. The girl in red, Song Yang, smiled as she stared at Ying Huan with the long whip in her hand and said in a lovable voice, "Aha, little girl, this elder sister will no longer show mercy to you." Ying Huan cast a look at her before her jade-like hands gently fell on the top of her jade-green zither. Following which, she softly said, "I was planning to say the same thing." Song Yang eyebrows raised for a moment, before giving a soft snort. With a jerk of her hand, the fiery red long whip bent and formed an arc. With a ferocious jolt, a crisp "pa" was transmitted out with a swift and fierce fluctuation. Shua! The fiery red whip suddenly swept forth. It was just like a berserk fiery python as it split apart the air and swung ruthlessly at Ying Huan at lightning speed. The fiery red glow rapidly grew bigger before Ying Huan's big eyes. Immediately, her jade-like fingers gently plucked her zither strings, causing wave after wave of jade-green sound waves to scream out, colliding against the fiery python. Dong! When they clashed, a clear sound transmitted out. Immediately Song Yang's body flashed forward. With a jerk of her jade-like hand, the soft fiery red long whip unexpectedly turned perfectly straight like a spear, and with a tip pointed like a scorpion's tail. As she directly targeted the vital spot between Ying Huan's brows, the degree of her viciousness was totally out of character for a lady. Flaming whip spear. The fiery red whip spear shot forwards explosively, as a formidable force frantically gathered on its surface. Even the Nirvana golden body of some 7 yuan Nirvana stage experts would be thoroughly penetrated by such power. Ying Huan eyes hardened due to Song Yang's swift and vicious attack. Immediately, she proceeded to use her jade-like fingers to press down on her zither, causing a subtle sound wave to transmit out at lightning speed. As the sound wave moved, the view before Song Yang's eyes instant turned blurry. This caused the head of the whip spear to unexpectedly shift slightly half a feet as it hurtled past Ying Huan's shoulder. Snort! After her attack failed, Song Yang gave a cold snort. With a grasp of her hand, her whip spear changed from a thrusting attack to a sweeping one. With violent force, it swept horizontally towards Ying Huan's head like a pole. Clang! The instant the whip spear swept horizontally, the jade-green zither also moved horizontally to block it. As the whip spear struck the surface of the zither, a clear sound erupted. As the zither twisted, Ying Huan extended her jade-like hands and seized it. Her black ponytail, which had been undone by the previous gale, now fell like a torrent in front of her chest, giving her an unexpected and rarely seen charm. The young lady's cheeks were slightly raised as she stared at Song Yang. A cold glint flashed past her eyes as her jade-like fingers swept across her zither, causing an astonishing fluctuation to swell and erupt out like a storm. Formless body sound, body laugh. A jade-green sound wave suddenly swelled and erupted from the zither, transforming into a blurry gigantic silhouette behind Ying Huan. The silhouette laughed heartily at the sky. An extremely astonishing jade-green fluctuation directly transformed into a spiral shape and ruthlessly shot towards Song Yang at speed akin to lighting. Ying Huan's counterattack obviously startled Song Yang. She hastily withdrew her fiery red long whip, which transformed into countless circles of light. Bang bang! The spiraling sound wave exploded forward with a speed akin to a hot knife through butter. It caused numerous circles of light to completely shatter and forced Song Yang to hastily retreat in shock. Clatter! Song Yang forcefully stabilized her body as her expression turned somewhat ugly. Even before she could make another move, Ying Huan's jade-like fingers had already started strumming her zither. Swoosh! A jade-green brilliance shot forward like an arrow and appeared in front of Song Yang in a split second. Currently, Song Yang was unable to muster any defense. Just as she was about to unwillingly concede defeat, the man in black nearby wrinkled his eyebrows and unexpectedly appeared in front of her with a shift of his body. His hand reached out as he gently flicked his finger at the incoming jade-green brilliance. Bang! Due to the man's finger flick, the jade green brilliance unexpectedly rebounded and shot backwards. In addition, it carried with it an even swifter and fearsome momentum as it rebounded back at Ying Huan. Ying Huan was also startled by this sudden scene, as her little face darkened. However, just as she was about to forcefully receive this attack, a palm reached out from behind her and directly grabbed that jade green brilliance. It gave the brilliance a firm pinch, causing it to explode in his palm. Ying Huan was dazed as she tilted her head. Her slightly absent-minded gaze found a familiar youthful figure standing behind her. Lin Dong slowly withdrew his palm and looked at the man in black while casually saying, "Victory and defeat is normal in a duel. By interfering and attacking a girl, isn't your upbringing rather lacking?" Upon hearing these words, a dark and mocking expression welled up on the face of the man in black. On the enormous platform, the expression of the black-clothed man called Huoshan darkened due to Lin Dong's words. Immediately, the corners of his mouth parted as he ridiculed, "I don't have any upbringing? I'm afraid that you are unqualified to utter such words." "Is that so?" A smile also appeared on Lin Dong's face. He slowly took a step forward, his fists slowly clenching as he laughed. "In that case, do you want to give it a try? This fight is not something that any ordinary disciple can participate in. You should first ask your Dao sect's elders." Huoshan glanced at Lin Dong and mocked. However, his laughter had just sounded when he suddenly heard a deafening laughter from the surrounding Dao sect disciples. He immediately knitted his brows and shifted his gaze, only to see the Dao sect disciples staring at him with mocking faces. They looked as though they had heard something extremely comical. Ying Huan also quietly grabbed her zither and stood up beside Lin Dong. Her black hair scattered in front of her chest like a waterfall. At this moment, her appearance actually possessed a rather quiet and gentle beauty, causing Lin Dong to be stunned momentarily when he saw her. "I thought that you would never show up." However, this quietness merely continued for a moment before Ying Huan rolled her eyes at Lin Dong and softly snorted. Lin Dong involuntarily turned speechless when he saw the young lady's lovely and pretty face. She had been purposefully avoiding him during this period of time. In the end, she actually claimed that it was his fault instead. It was indeed difficult to deal with women. "Since you have appeared, the final round will be left to you. However, on behalf of every disciple of the Dao sect, let me seriously warn you. If you lose the battle today, you can forget about having a peaceful life in the future." Ying Huan's eyes formed the shape of a crescent when she saw Lin Dong's speechless appearance. Immediately, her hand patted Lin Dong's shoulder as she coyly spoke. Lin Dong also smiled when he heard this. His eyes stared at the nearby Huoshan and softly said, "Since someone has delivered himself to my doorstep, he will surely be unhappy if I do not step on him a little." He, well said, I like it." Ying Huan laughed secretly but immediately sensed that the dual meaning behind his words. Her face immediately reddened a little. However, she quickly recovered to herself when Lin Dong's eyes looked over. She waved her hand as though nothing had happened and said, "I will leave it to you." After her voice faded, Ying Huan swiftly exited from the arena and returned to the area where the Dao sect disciples were. After which, she gently patted her somewhat heated face. Lin Dong smilingly shook his head. His eyes glanced towards the nearby Huoshan, whose expression had turned a little ugly because of the ridicule from the Dao sect disciples. After which, he turned to the other side where Chenzhen and other elders of the Dao sect were located. He laughed, "Teacher Uncle Chenzhen, shall this disciple represent the sect in the 5th round?" "All right." Chenzhen smiled faintly. Immediately, he looked towards the two grey-clothed elders from the Great Precipice Cave and said, "This is a disciple of my desolate hall, Lin Dong." At first, there was a slightly mockful expression on the faces of those two grey-clothed elders. After all, they could tell that Lin Dong was merely at 6 Yuan Nirvana stage and there was too much of a gap when compared to Huoshan. However, that ridicule instantly disappeared when they heard his name. Instead, shock took its place. Lin Dong? That Lin Dong, who is rumored to have fought with the leader of the Devil Seal Mass, Yao Ling, until both of them were seriously injured. A grey-clothed elder from the Great Precipice Cave stared at Lin Dong with shocked eyes as he spoke. The previous Blood Rock Grounds incident had stirred quite a great commotion. In the end, the Dao sect had dispatched quite a number of experts to capture and kill the criminals who had attacked the Dao sect disciples. Due to this, it caused news of the matter to spread rather quickly. Perhaps even Lin Dong himself was unaware how much his reputation had spread while he was holed up in the Dao sect. Ha ha, such a matter did indeed occur. Chen Zhen laughed faintly. That grey-cloaked old man's eyes flashed for a moment. Immediately, they paused on Lin Dong and laughed. This young man only appears to be at 6 Yuan Nirvana stage. Based on the rumors, he had to swallow a large amount of mysterious fruits back then in order to boost his strength and reach the stage where he could contend with Yao Ling. When his words reached this point, his voice paused for a moment before continuing. However, I think that this young friend will not get to use such a method for today's contest, am I right? Chen Zhen and Wu Dao frowned a little when they heard these words. Just as they were about to speak, Lin Dong had already cupped his hands towards the grey-cloaked elders before he laughed. Elders, you can be rest assured that there is likely no need to use that method today. The two grey-cloaked elders were startled because of Lin Dong's words. Immediately, their expressions became a little ugly. Clearly, they understood the meaning behind Lin Dong's words. Although they were a little displeased by Lin Dong's arrogance, it was impossible for them to lower their status and argue with a disciple. All they could do was to quietly throw an icy cold gaze towards Huoshan. The latter also smiled coldly and nodded in understanding. Cough. However, their displeasure caused the corners of Chen Zhen's and Wu Dao's mouths to reveal a smile. After which, they coughed softly and reprimanded Lin Dong a little. Only then did they wave their hands and speak, "You shall represent us in this final match." Lin Dong cupped his hands together towards Wu Dao. He immediately turned around and smilingly looked at Huoshan, whose smile had now turned a little dark, before speaking. "Senior brother Huoshan, please." "Ha ha, junior brother Lin Dong, please be careful. Fists and legs do not have eyes. Please forgive me if you are injured." Huoshan smilingly said. "Likewise, senior brother Huoshan." The smile on Lin Dong's face was equally bright. Hypocrites. Nearby, when Ying Huan saw their actions, she involuntarily curled her mouth. Couldn't the two of them tell how fake the smiles on their faces were? This fellow is purposefully agitating the other party. Beside her, Mo Ling chuckled. Ying Huan looked at Huoshan when she heard this. She discovered that the smile on the latter's face had indeed become a little stiff, and immediately laughed. They truly disliked Huoshan. Upon witnessing Lin Dong silence Huoshan in this manner, it allowed them to relieve some of the frustration within their hearts. In order to deal with a person like Huoshan, only someone like Lin Dong can deal a blow to him both physically and mentally. Junior brother Lin Dong's sharp wit is in no way inferior to your fame. Huoshan slowly stepped forward. The smile on his face had an extra trace of gloominess. He stared at Lin Dong and laughed faintly. "I wonder how you will perform this time around without the opportunity to use those mysterious fruits." Bang! Huoshan suddenly stepped forward after his voice sounded. Soon after, a wave of extremely vigorous yuan power suddenly swept out from within his body. After which, it transformed into rumbling pressure that covered Lin Dong. Huoshan displayed quite an outstanding strength. It was evident that he was much stronger than the Song Yang from before. The surrounding Dao sect disciples had quite a solemn expression because of this. Although they were extremely confident in Lin Dong, Huoshan was no ordinary individual. In order to become the most outstanding younger generation member of the Great Principal Cave, the latter definitely had the skills to back it. Lin Dong curled both of his hands, while his body was as straight as a spear. He did not move regardless of how strong the yuan power pressure from Huoshan was. Only a faint chill flashed across his narrowed eyes. "Allow me to see how powerful you are, the man who was able to fight Yao Ling until both parties were seriously injured." A dark and stern expression flashed across Huoshan's eyes. Immediately, he took a step forward. Wild and violent yuan power whizzed out from within his body like a great ocean wave. His body transformed into a black shadow as he rushed out. In a flash, he appeared in front of Lin Dong. Half Mountain Cave. Huoshun did not show any mercy as he threw a punch forward. Yuan power immediately gathered wildly on it. His punch was powerful enough to penetrate a mountain. Bang! The wild and violent fist contained astonishing strength as it was thrown forward explosively. It was also swift as lightning. In the span of a breath, it had already arrived in front of Lin Dong's chest. Sharp rushing wind sounds spread on the platform in a deafening manner. Bam! The wild and violent fist suddenly froze in the next moment, while Huoshun's pupils instantly shrunk. That was because he saw Lin Dong block his fist with a single palm. His powerful attack, which could penetrate a mountain, was actually directly blocked by Lin Dong. This tiny bit force is not enough. Lin Dong parted his mouth and smiled at Huoshun. However, his smile was exceptionally chilling. In the next moment, he suddenly gripped his palm while his entire arm also began to squirm. Green dragon scales swiftly surged out. Within a short couple of breaths, it had transformed into a ferocious and frighteningly ice-cold dragon arm. Lin Dong's current green dragon arm appeared even more majestic and muscular than before. Waves of light surged on the scales. An indescribable energy ripple spread out in a partially visible manner. Huoshun's heart gradually sunk when he saw this scene. He finally realized that he had underestimated Lin Dong. Underestimating a foe during a battle would undoubtedly have a price. Therefore, the Yuan power within Huoshun's body immediately began to circulate wildly when he saw the ice-cold smile that slowly emerged on Lin Dong's face. Bright golden light erupted from within Huoshun's body. The golden light surged, but Lin Dong did not move. His green dragon arm grabbed Huoshun's arm and viciously flung itself through the air, directly grabbing the latter and heavily smashed him onto the ground like a whip. Bang! 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 The entire ground trembled violently at this moment. When everyone turned to look at Lin Dong, who had become an avatar of violence, they were instantly petrified. The ground trembled. Numerous deep and large holes continuously appeared on the ground around Lin Dong. Cracked lines spread from these holes. His wild and violent strength caused the hearts of quite a number of people to tremble. Everyone was stunned when they saw this scene unfold in the battleground. The intense fight that they had imagined did not appear. At the moment, Lin Dong appeared to have turned into a demonic beast. His green dragon hands grabbed Huoshun's arm and smashed him around in a crazy and violent manner. There was an absence of any exquisite moves. Lin Dong merely relied on his frightening physical strength and took advantage of a major mistake made by Huoshun. After which, he enacted this interesting and violent scene. Bang! Lin Dong grabbed Huoshun and smashed the latter violently on the ground for over a dozen times. Finally, he caught his breath. His arm was swung and the human figure in it shot out in a miserable manner. It directly rubbed against the ground, forming a 100-meter-long scar on it. Gulp! Those solidified eyes from around the stage looked at that miserable human figure that Lin Dong had flung away like garbage. Finally, they involuntarily swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Under the attention of the crowd, that miserable human figure finally stabilized himself. Immediately he staggered and stood up. At this moment, Huoshun's clothes were in tatters. Moreover, it was possible to see some blood traces appearing on his body and even his breathing had turned chaotic. Clearly, the random smashing by Lin Dong previously had left him with some injuries. However, Huoshun was no ordinary individual. Even though Lin Dong had took advantage of his opening previously, he had immediately activated his Nirvana golden body as well. Therefore, that seemingly wild and violent random smashing by Lin Dong did not cause him to lose his fighting strength. Instead, it only affected his appearance. Lin Dong. Huoshun's hair scattered down from his head. His expression was so dark and solemn that it appeared a little distorted. The fury that spluttered out from both of his eyes seemed to be intent on burning Lin Dong into ashes. Although he was not seriously injured, being held by someone and smashed randomly around was simply too shameful. I'm sorry. It has been a long time since I fought. Once I grab something, my hands will feel itchy and I will involuntarily fling it about, Lin Dong merely smiled and said in the face of a furious-looking Huoshun. He. Ying Huan, who was similarly stunned because of the previous scene, could not control herself when she heard this. She hid her head behind Mo Ling. After which, her hand continuously hit Mo Ling's shoulder. A laughter that was somewhat painfully suppressed was emitted. Mo Ling and the other disciples from Dao sect had a strange expression on their faces. If it was not because of the venue, it was likely that they would have started laughed heartily. Lin Dong's words were truly meant to infuriate Huishan to death. Huishan's expression became extremely gloomy because of Lin Dong's words. His body started to tremble gently. Clearly, he was firmly suppressing the killing desire within his heart that was formed due to fury. It is too early for you to be celebrating. Huishan's eyes stared at Lin Dong and spoke in a dense voice. Huishan was aware that he was hit earlier because he was too arrogant. With his strength at the peak of the 8 Yuan Nirvana stage, he truly did not believe that Lin Dong was able to do anything to him. Bang! The dense voice had just sounded when Huishan suddenly stepped forward. The peak of the 8 Yuan Nirvana stage strength was completely displayed at this moment. Waves after waves of giant wave-like Yuan power continuously swept out from within his body. Great precipice demon mountain body. Huishan's expression was vaguely a little wretched. His hand seals changed with a lightning-like speed. Majestic Yuan power penetrated through his skin. His original skin had also gradually turned dark yellow in color. At a glance, he appeared like an ashen mountain. Great precipice demon spear. After the color of his body changed, Huishan clenched his hand. A dark yellow Yuan power wildly gathered on his hand before it directly transformed into a long yellow spear. The spear possessed a shocking ripple that was emitted. After making these moves, Huishan's aura instantly soared. Everyone could tell that the most outstanding disciple of the Great Precipice Cave had begun to unleash all of his fighting strength. The surrounding Dao sect's disciples' expressions once again turned grave at this moment. Clearly, they were aware that Huishan was likely angered by Lin Dong to the point that he had almost lost control. Bang! A cold glint flashed within Huishan's eyes. However, he did not say any unnecessary words. His foot stomped on the ground. In a flash, he appeared on Lin Dong's left. After which, the long spear in his hand pierced explosively towards Lin Dong's heart without any hesitation. His attack was quite vicious. However, a green light gathered on Lin Dong's chest when the long spear was about to pierce through his heart. It directly turned into a head-sized green scale. Clang! The long spear heavily pierced onto the green scale. However, it was not as easy to penetrate it as Huishan had imagined. It was as though there was an extremely powerful defensive force on the scale. Swoosh! After the scale blocked the spear tip, Lin Dong extended both of his hands. After which, he flicked his 10 fingers. Bright green light whistled out from it in a storm-like manner. It transformed into green scales that directly targeted the fatal spots on Huishan's body. A green light flashed on these scales, while sharp teeth protruded from its edges. It was permeated with an endless sharp cold air, appearing like numerous lethal weapons. Humph! At this moment, Huishan clearly did not dare to slight those scales after the previous lesson. He immediately let out a cold snort after seeing Lin Dong's attack. The long spear in his hand formed numerous light arcs, appearing just like a light shield that knocked aside all those green scales that were targeting his fatal spots. Huishan immediately counterattacked after blocking those scales. His long spear formed a sharp arc that penetrated towards Lin Dong with lightning-like speed. The gale formed was something that even some 8 Yuan Nirvana stage experts would not dare to face head-on. Desolate blade. Lin Dong raised his head. He watched the viciously attacking Huishan before narrowing his eyes. Both of his hands were clenched gently before they hacked down abruptly. Buzz buzz. The moment both of his hands hacked down, a shocking desolate force whistled out from his body like floodwater. In an instant, it had transformed into 100 feet large light that shot out explosively from his palm. After which, the light gathered before directly forming an enormous blade. There were some cracks that began to ripple and spread on the blade. So big. Those surrounding Desolate Hall disciples were speechless when they saw the desolate blade that Lin Dong had created. The size of the desolate blade was determined by the strength of the desolate force within one's body. However, they had never seen anyone who was able to form such a large desolate blade. Moreover, they could clearly sense that the desolate force ripple from Lindong's desolate blade was extremely pure and powerful. Swoosh! The cold glint from the blade reflected into Lindong's eyes. His hand waved and the enormous desolate blade tore through the air. Immediately, it hacked furiously towards Huoshan. A vaguely visible scar even appeared at the space where the blade glow passed. The desolate blade hacked downwards furiously and Huoshan's expression changed faintly. By relying on his 6 yuan nirvana stage strength, Lindong was actually able to unleash such a formidable attack. This took him by surprise. Sky-splitting spear. Nonetheless, even though he was shocked, he did not retreat. A stern gaze flashed across his eyes before monstrous yuan power wildly swept out. The spear shook and its size also swelled. A rich light swiftly gathered at its tip. That sharp glow was extremely dazzling. Bang! The long spear rushed out and directly collided violently with the desolate blade that was hacking over. A clear metallic sound appeared in the sky. After which, a frightening wind swept apart in the sky like a storm. Bang bang! Huoshan's body was quickly forced back by over a dozen steps. He clenched his somewhat numb hands gently. Just when he looked forward, his eyes abruptly narrowed before his body pulled back explosively. Swoosh! However, Huoshan's body had just moved when a figure had already approached him with lightning-like speed. That figure was Lindong. However, Lindong's arms have currently transformed into ferocious-looking green dragon arms. Waves after waves of energy ripples that were visible to the naked eye, spread out from those shaking scales. The young face of Lindong, who had appeared near Huoshan, revealed an icy cold smile. Immediately, a cold glint flashed in his eyes. His fist, which contained a frightening strength, began to pour out like a storm. All of Huoshan's retreat paths have been blocked. Bang bang! The fist violently landed on Huoshan's body. Even though he was using quite a powerful physical body enhancement martial arts, the intense pain still seeped deep into his bones. In a split second, Huoshan had already suffered over a dozen attacks and a trace of blood had even appeared on the corner of his mouth. His eyes were a little frightened. The ferocity of Lindong's close-range attacks had clearly caused him to suffer a great loss. Bang! Lindong threw another punch that was filled with force and heavily smashed it onto Huoshan's arm. Wild and violent strength spat out from it and the punch actually forced Huoshan to fly dozens of meters back. Bang! Huoshan once again steadied his body. His face had some bruising. Although his attack had also landed on Lindong during this close-quarters combat, it appeared to have dealt little damage to Lindong, causing him to feel somewhat dispirited. That fellow's physical body is actually so powerful. He has definitely practiced an extremely powerful body-tempering martial arts. Huoshan rubbed the blood trace from the corner of his mouth. His eyes were sinister as he stared at Lindong in the distance. Both of his eyes flashed. Suddenly, he clenched his teeth tightly and bit the tip of his tongue. Bright red essence blood shot out from without his mouth and handed on his hand. Lindong, even if you possess the strength to overturn mountains, I will still suppress you today. Huoshan's eyes were furious, dark and chilly. Both of his blood-filled hands suddenly formed numerous strange seals. In the next moment, a monstrous light swept out from within his body. Finally, it transformed into a 1,000-feet-large mountain in the midair. There were some caves on the mountain that seemed to form a certain unusual formation that had a kind of mysteriousness seeping from it. The yuan power around the place began to ripple intensely when this mountain appeared. Those disciples from the Great Precipice Cave had a heat surging up their faces. On the other hand, those disciples of the Tao sect, including even Ying Huan, had grave expressions. They involuntarily cried out, "Lindong, be careful. This is the strongest martial arts of the Great Precipice Cave." Great Precipice Cave scripture? Too late. A ferocious laughter flashed across Huoshan's eyes. Without giving Lindong any time to react, he flipped his palm and the enormous mountain with caves was accompanied by a shocking strength as it turned into a dark shadow that covered Lindong. That momentum was earth-shaking. This video will end here.